Hey, what is up YouTube? Kolst here. So now we are going to be talking about the neutral cards of the new set, Fracture and Alterac Valley. I have to say, especially in the neutral cards, but just in general, this is one of the craziest and most interesting expansions, just card-wise, that we've seen in a very long time. And there are, I believe, how many? 24 neutrals that we have not yet talked about here. So we're going to talk about all of those here. So if you like the video, like, dislike it, subscribe, comment, all that stuff. But let's get right into it. So the first one we have here is Corporal. The 2-mana 2/3 with Honorable Kill, give your other minions Divine Shield. So a 2/3 with the upside of basically win the game instantly. I mean, pretty good, right? So being able to trigger the Honorable Kill will be difficult sometimes, but I mean, man, it's like, this thing is really crazy upside. Your opponent will probably most of the time. The thing is like you just probably can't even respond to this with a 3/2 or something, because then you give your opponent a Divine Shield. Maybe you won't have a choice, but yeah, it's just very crazy. Especially if this comes, we don't know what the rotation is going to be. Something mentioning, but I mean, I imagine this comes in with Broom or something. Jeez. Because then you're always going to be able to do it. But yeah, overall, probably limited by the fact that realistically, your opponent, if they can. The fact that they might have to do a play they don't want to do just to try to deny this is already very good, right? But you're probably just not going to get like a whole board of Divine Shields that often with this realistically. So I think it's just very good though. I'm going to give this a 4 out of 5 because I mean, it is one of those things where if you do get it, you just win probably. Now let's move on to another 2-drop, which is Sneaky Scout. 2-mana 3/2 Stealth. Honorable Kill, your next hero power costs 0. So a 2-mana 3/2 with Stealth is already very good for a 2-drop, like very good. It's probably going to be better actually because, it makes your opponent less able to trigger Honorable Kill off of it. And yeah, just the additional upside of getting a free hero power. If you're in a class with a good hero power, it's very, very good. So yeah, this is consistently just going to do essentially too much for a 2-drop. So I'm going to give this as well a 4 out of 5, just very, very strong. With that, let's move on to the next one, Troll Centurion. 8-mana 8/8 with Rush, Honorable Kill, deal 8 damage to the enemy hero. So this thing would be a very kind of hilarious interaction with like a Moarg Forge Fiend. 8 armor, haha, no you don't. But actually not sure whether it'll get the armor first or not. That would be... We don't know how Honorable Kill is going to work with Death Rattle. They might take the damage and then gain the armor, which might mean you can kill them through a Forge Fiend if they have 8 health. I'm not 100% sure on that. But anyway, I mean, an 8-mana 8/8 Rush is already pretty good. You're probably just never going to... Again, unless you run it into like a Moarg or something, you're probably just not going to get the Honorable Kill very often. But it is a thing that will happen sometimes. So obviously in the mode where a 9-mana 9/9 Rush is good, this is also, very good, probably better. So very solid card. I'll give it again 4 out of 5. Now here we have Tower Sergeant. It's a 4-mana 4/4 Battle Cry. If you control at least 2 other minions, gain +2/+2. So this is going to depend probably a bit on which class you are. If you're playing like Druid or Warlock or something, it's going to be a lot easier to trigger this than if you're playing, Major Priest. So it will depend a bit on the class. Overall though, I think controlling 2 other minions, obviously you can, summon things on the same turn potentially if you have like cheap stuff, but probably just not going to be too hard to trigger overall. If you do get a 4-mana 6/6, that's pretty darn good. So for this, I think it's going to depend on what kind of deck you're drafting. If you are drafting an aggressive tempo type of deck, this is amazing. This is like at least a 4, maybe even bordering on 5 out of 5, but in a slower deck, this probably isn't going to be too good. Probably be more like a 2. So overall, it's like I would rate it as like a weak 4 out of 5 or a strong 3 out of 5, something around there. It's really going to depend on what type of deck you're drafting there. So let's move on to Stormpike Quartermaster, 2-mana 2/2. After you cast a spell, give a random minion in your hand +1/+1. So compared to all these cards that have huge upside and also have vanilla stats, this one a bit weaker than vanilla, and this is just not something you can abuse super well in arenas. Maybe sometimes you can have a priest or something and pop off with this. Even shaman can probably pop off with this decently well actually, but overall probably not going to be very consistent. So I'm going to give this a 2 out of 5. Next one we have is Stormpike Marshal. This is a 4-mana 2/6 taunt, if you took 5 or more damage on your opponent's turn, this costs 1. It's a very interesting way of kind of punishing aggro in a sense. It isn't like super oppressive. Imagine you have multiple of these and then you just obliterate them. But overall, a 4-mana 2/6 taunt isn't that bad. It's not particularly good. At least this one isn't a beast though, so you know, you have that going for it. And this is gonna be one of those things where it's like, people aren't gonna ever really play around this, right? So if you are behind, you get a 2/6. The thing is that if you took 5 or more damage, unless you're taking it from multiple small minions, if they just hit you in the face with a 5/5, getting a 2/6 is good, but not necessarily that good into their big minion that just hit you, right? So overall, I think this is good. Obviously, you know, it's a lot better in slower decks than it is in tempo decks. So I'm gonna put this one at a 3 out of 5. Just kind of a middle finger to aggro there. Moving on to Snowblind Harpy. This is a 3-mana 3/4. Battlecry. If you're holding a frost spell, gain 5 armor. So Shaman, as we reviewed in the last video, is getting a lot of really good frost spells that you actually would want to draft. So Shaman would probably be the main class for this. The other class is Mage, that kind of has frost spells occasionally, but it wouldn't be super consistent. So overall, I mean, this is mostly going to be a 3-mana 3/4, so in normal class, I guess a 3-mana 3/4 we'll say is a 3 out of 5. And particularly if you're playing like a slower kind of Shaman, maybe you could raise this up to like a 4. But, you know, it's mostly just going to be a 3-mana 3/4. Moving on to the next card here, we have Ram Commander. 2-mana 2/2 Battlecry, add 2 1/1 Rams with Rush to your hand. So basically this is a neutral bumper car. Bumper car had Rush itself though, but it was a death rattle. So this just gives you the cards immediately. I mean, overall, like, it's a bit expensive, right? You know, you're getting 4/4 in stats, I guess, for 4 mana, which isn't that bad, and you're getting it with Rush. Typically just having these kinds of flexible rushes is just very good, particularly in non-ping classes. You're going to value something like this much higher. So, you know, again, in like Warrior, Priest, you know, these kind of classes, Shaman too. And maybe you'll like it in Druid as well, just for the synergy. These are beasts and they have that beast AoE. So overall going to be a pretty solid card. It's either going to be like a strong 3 out of 5 or a weak 4 out of 5. I'll probably lean on the strong 3 out of 5 range, but probably a bit better again in the classes that don't ping very easily. Moving on next to Reflecto Engineer. This is a 3-mana 2/4 Battlecry. Swap the attack and health of all minions in both players' hands. I honestly don't know how to rate this card. It could be very obnoxious. It might be. I just don't know, right? Like, you could get punished hard for playing this potentially, but also, I mean, you would play this when you think it'll help you, right? So if you have things that you want to swap, I don't know. It's probably not bad. I'm gonna say this is probably like a 2 out of 5. It's just very uncontrolled. It could go very well, it could go very poorly. It's hard to say. It's probably not terrible, but it's probably not super good either. Move on to the next one, which is Piggyback Imp, something you would not want to have their attack and health swapped of. It's a 3-mana 4/1 with Death Rattle. Summon a 4/1 Imp. So there was recently a card which was this, except 4 mana. It was a 4-mana 5/1 that summons a 5/1. This is a 3-mana 4/1 that summons a 4/1, which is a bit of an upgrade, I think. Honestly, I picked that 5/1 pretty often. It was pretty good. So this one is just very good. It's going to depend on how many, you know, ping classes are in any given meta, but this is just a very good 3-mana card. Probably leaning on this, again, kind of on the borderline between like a strong 3 out of 5 and a weak 4 out of 5, most likely. Definitely a solid neutral 3-drop. Moving on next to Legionnaire. Legionnaire is a 6-mana 9/3 Death Rattle. Give all minions in your hands +2/+2. So overall, you know, there was the 9-mana version of this. It was what, a 9-mana 9/6 that gave your hand +3/+3. Part of the problem with that sometimes was the fact that it had 6 health and you couldn't trade it off. This thing is always going to die, right? Because it has 3 health, and your opponent can't just ignore 9 attack on turn 6, especially now that Battlemaster exists. So your opponent's just going to have to kill it. The problem is that, you know, if they have like a 1 or 2 mana deal 3 type of removal, you're losing so much tempo off of this that I don't think the Death Rattle is really going to save you, and you really need to have some kind of draw or, you know, minion generation to really make this worth it as well. So overall, I don't think it's a terrible card, because sometimes it'll be really good, but I'm going to give it a 2 out of 5 because I think most of the time it's going to be a bit inconsistent. It's just a very high risk to get your board swung that hard by playing a minion that's so weak to removal. Moving on to Korak the Blood Rager, 4 mana 3/5 Death Rattle. If this minion wasn't honorable killed, resummon it. It's a very interesting use of the honorable kill mechanic. So the thing that's weird is that honorable kill has to be killed with damage. So you could silence this, right? You could silence the effect off, but otherwise you need to do exactly 5 damage to this, or else you just can't kill it. And I believe that honorable kill has to be triggered on your turn. So I think that means that even if you whatever you trade this off into, even if it's, yeah, I think even if they deal exact damage to this, I could be wrong, but I think then you would still resummon this as well. So this thing's just going to be incredibly annoying. People simply aren't going to consistently be able to kill this. So overall, I mean, I think this is very good. Probably most people have some way of being able to respond to it, so it probably won't get too much value, but I'm going to give this a 4 out of 5. If it gets 1 resummon though, it's already nuts. It's just that there will be probably a fair enough time that it will just be a 4 mana 3/5, so, and it won't do too much. All right, moving on to the next one we have here, which is Kobold Taskmaster. This is a 3 mana 2/4 with Battle Cry. Add 2 armor scraps to your hand that give +2 health to a minion. I believe these are 1 mana spells, so neutral spells. Holy crap. So I'm thinking like the way you probably want to use this is, you know, you just have like a 4-drop that sticks on board or whatever, and then you can just play this on turn 5 and give it +4 health. So 3 mana 2/4, give +4 health to your other minions. Seems pretty good, actually. It's going to be more control focused than something, you know, like Fungalmancer, for example. You'd be doing it to get better trades and push more damage. This is more just trying to create, you know, establish a board and be more annoying, generate value. But I feel like overall it's not super crazy because it's just not super stat efficient. So I'm going to give this like a 3 out of 5. I think it's decent. It's more of a control card, as I was saying, I think. Probably not going to be exactly what you're looking for in more aggressive types of deck. Let's move on to the Iron Deep Trog. This is a 1 mana 1/2. After your opponent casts a spell, summon a copy of this. So if they cast multiple spells, your board literally just gets filled with Trogs. Probably a bit of a meme. Feels like, I don't know, you would have to like stick this behind Taunt or something, but then it's like, how good is just getting a bunch of 1/2s? It's probably decent, but you know, you probably just wouldn't expect too much from this. But it's like, if you put this behind Taunt, they can't actually remove it. Because if you... Oh, it does say after you cast a spell, so I guess it does actually have to survive, so they could remove it too, so that makes it less fun also. Yeah, you probably just don't expect much of this. I think we give this a 1 out of 5. It's probably a strong 1 out of 5, but still a 1 out of 5. Just not... There's better 1-drops even in neutral nowadays. Now we move on to Ice Hoof Protector, a 6 mana 2/10 Taunt. Freeze any character damaged by this minion. This is annoying as hell. It's a little weak to like a swap, you know, an attack health swap or something. And if you silence it, it's pretty irrelevant too. But man, I mean, if it doesn't get removed or something, and even if, you know, if someone has to use like a bunch of removal on this, you're pretty happy as well. Just rather weak to silence, but yeah, Jesus. The Smork in me is offended by all of this cheat. Overall, I mean, it's like one of those things. There's been other cards that are kind of like this. There's like the 8 mana 2/14 Taunt Divine Shield. This is basically just a way better version of that because it comes out earlier and it's not quite as weak to silence and hard removal and stuff. So I think this is pretty good. Even in an aggressive deck, you can just throw this down and then your opponent, you know, can't trade into your other minions anymore. So I think it's good. Man, those freezes are just going to be extremely annoying because there's going to be a fair amount of times your opponent just isn't really able to get through this like period. So I'm going to give this a 4 out of 5. With that, let's move on to Ice Revenant, 4 mana 4/5 Elemental. Whenever you cast a frost spell, gain +2/+2. So I mean, Shaman, we don't know which sets are going to be in, but Shaman's probably still going to have some level of elemental synergy when this comes in. And yeah, a 4 mana 4/5 is already good. And I mean, this thing scales out of its mind. You can cast a bunch of those like 1 mana cycle freezes and stuff. Like this thing is extremely good in Shaman. In Shaman, this is probably a 5 out of 5. In Mage, this might be like a 4 out of 5. And in every other class, probably like a 3. Just because then it's just a Yeti. But yeah, in Shaman, this is probably I dare I say auto pick, because there's some really good frost spells that you're going to be picking, and a lot of them are cheap too. So I mean, this is going to be, it's going to do way too much. Moving on to the next one here is Humongous Owl, 7 mana, 8/4, Death Rattle. Deal 8 damage to a random enemy. Do you see how big that owl is? It's literally huge. So important to note that this is, well, it's a death rattle. You could silence it, so it's very weak to silence, removal, that type of stuff. But also, it's a random enemy, so this could go face, which could be a very good thing, but it could be a very bad thing, right? If you play this into, if your opponent has an 8 out on their board and your opponent just plays a bunch of minions and removes it, you're probably not going to get, you know, the thing you want. So it is a lot. I mean, it's basically 16 damage on a 7 mana card, but I feel like just the fact that you're not going to really be able to control it very well and your opponent might just deal with it really efficiently, it's going to limit this too much. So I'm going to give this a 2 out of 5. It probably does too much to be lower than that, but I don't think it's going to be the late game card you're going to want. Next we have Herald of Lokalar. This is a 4 mana 3/5 Battle Cry, draw a frost spell. So again, same with all the other frost spell synergies. This one probably isn't quite the upside of the other one, but I mean, if you get 4 mana 3/5 draw a spell, that's really good. And again, like the frost spells tend to be good, so very good in Shaman for sure. Probably going to be pretty consistent in Mage as well, but other classes it's a 4 mana 3/5, which is bad. So in Shaman, say this is at least a 4 out of 5. But in other classes, mostly you're not going to have anything, so probably like a 2, or I don't know. We might be at the point where a 4 mana 3/5 is like a 1 out of 5. It's just not good enough anymore. Moving on to the next card, we have Gangster, 2 mana 4/2 with Stealth. After your opponent plays a minion, attack it. So there's obviously a bit of a risk with this card. Like your opponent could just play like a Loot Hoarder or something, and then you could just kind of get wrecked. At least it's still trading evenly on tempo though. But yeah, it just seems a little risky. It does seem like it would be most of the time good on curve, because if you imagine you're going second and you just play this on 2, your opponent wants to play a 3/4, but then it just gets wrecked. But even then, you're just getting a slightly positive trade, right? It doesn't seem like this is probably a decent card. Like maybe it's a weak 3 out of 5 or a strong 2 out of 5. It just feels like it's not really, you're getting marginal upside at best, and you're getting kind of obliterated at worst. So I'm not the biggest fan of it, but yeah, I'll leave it, you know, like maybe as a strong 2 or a weak 3 out of 5. And this we move on to Frostwolf Warmaster. I've seen a lot of memes about this card from Constructed, but in Arena, which we are talking about here, costs 1 less for each card you've played this turn. So most of the time, you're probably not going to get too much out of this. You're going to be pretty happy if you can ever get this out as a 2 mana 3/3, honestly. But it's just going to be a little bit hard. In Constructed, this is going to be 0 mana all the time, and people are going to be laughing. But I don't even know if it's going to be played in Constructed. Overall, yeah, probably just not good enough. In Arena, not going to be very consistent. If you do have, you know, the right kind of stuff, like by all means, but just probably not going to work too much. So I'm going to give this a, you know, I'm going to give it a 2 out of 5, because it's probably some upside, but probably a rather weak 2 out of 5. And we move on to Frantic Hippogriff, a 5 mana 3/7 rush beast. Honorable kill, gain Wind Fury. So again, honorable kill, you need to exact kill something. It is, I mean, a 5 mana 3/7 rush is pretty good. Like a 5 mana 4/7 is an okay 5-drop, right? So you're just giving up 1 stat and you're getting all these, all this text. And especially, I mean, any slower deck, or really, I mean, it's just pretty good overall, I think. Especially if you're a class that doesn't have area of effect, you're getting this kind of pseudo AoE, right? It's like a mini Batterhead, essentially. So, I mean, you can get that first honorable kill to get it to attack twice. So overall, I say probably just a pretty solid card. Probably give it like a 4 out of 5, maybe on the lower end of that. But yeah, I think it's better than, you know, just like vanilla stats or something. So I'll give it a 4 out of 5. Moving on to Direwolf Commander. This is a 3 mana 2/5 honorable kill. Summon a 2/2 wolf with stealth. So a 3 mana 2/5 is already pretty good, and you just have this upside of possibly getting another 2/2, and at which point it's doing a lot for a minion on curve. I would imagine that getting honorable kill with this will be a little tricky, but I mean, imagine you're playing like Paladin or something and things happen to line up, this thing, and you buff it, like this could go pretty out of control pretty fast.
But yeah, so overall, again, I mean, it just does a bit too much for a 3-drop, I think. So it is worth noting it's just not super good if you don't actually get the honorable kill off, and you just won't probably not that much. So I think it's a little weaker than some of the other ones. So I'm going to give this like a strong 3 out of 5. I'm going to lean it more on that side, but it's a good 3-drop. Next, we have Bunker Sergeant. This is a 3-mana 2/4 battle cry. If your opponent has 2 or more minions, deal 1 damage to all enemy minions. So obviously, most of the times that you want a 1 damage AoE, it means your opponent's gonna have multiple minions. Obviously, right? It only hits enemies as well. It's not like a whirlwind or anything. So the only time that this isn't going to trigger, that you would want it to trigger, is if your opponent just happens to have exactly one health minion, right? That'll be the only time where this will feel bad. But generally speaking, like, you're going to be able to trigger this when you actually want to. So I think, again, in non-ping classes that don't have AoE, you know, like Rogue or Druid or something, I think they're going to be very happy to have this. I think this is, you know, it's more of a control focused card, obviously, but yeah, it just seems very good, honestly. I think it's just going to be pretty consistent. So I'm going to give this, I think, a 4 out of 5 here. But you'll value it differently in some classes versus others for sure. Classes that can ping more easily, like Demon Hunter, you probably don't need this as much, right? Certain classes are going to absolutely love it. With that, we move on to the last card, which is Bloodguard, 5 mana 4/7. Whenever this minion takes damage, give your minions +1 attack. So I mentioned before, a 5 mana 4/7 is already good, and this is a 5 mana 4/7 with upside, and pretty crazy upside. I mean, potentially there is the chance that you can just play this as a druid or something, or really anyone, and then ping it yourself, and then with some kind of effect, and then you basically turn it into a Savage Roar and just, you know, finish off an opponent that way. But generally speaking, I mean, you're just going to play this. It's a good tempo card, and the upside is sheer upside, and it's pretty significant, I think. Obviously, some decks are going to value it higher than others. You want to have it with spread, ideally, but you can just pick this, you know, in just a regular deck and just throw it out there for stats. So overall, pretty solid. I think I'm willing to give it a 4 out of 5 off of that upside. I think a 5 mana 4/7 would just be a 3-star, but this would be, I think I'm willing to give it an extra star for this. So this is I think a decent 4-star card. All right, that is it for all of the neutral cards from Fractured and Alterac Valley. Thanks a lot for hanging out, everyone. If you liked the video, like. If you dislike it, let me know in the comment section which cards of these you're excited, because these are definitely, as I mentioned in the beginning of this video, an extremely interesting set overall, but especially for neutrals as well. They've been doing some pretty crazy things, but I think it's pretty cool for Arena mainly, because that's where, you know, people are going to be seeing these cards the most. But yeah, thanks a lot for hanging out again. We will see you all in the next one.